Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special podcast on some of the most esoteric topics you could ever imagine. Our special guest is Dr. Richard Allan Miller. He's a pioneer in the annals of metaphysical and paranormal exploration. Dr. Miller began working at the actual X-Files, the world of Navy Intel, SEAL Corp, and then MRU in the late 60s. His public collaborations and research continue secretly. Maybe we'll get to that. And as an original Black Ops team member, Miller's research in the field of paranormal began as a graduate physicist working 11 years with Navy Intel in anesthesiology. And during this period, numerous foundational papers, which will blow your mind, including a holographic concept of reality and embryonic holography, were written.
Holography, yeah.
Yeah, his past and current writings and presentations reveal a depth of knowledge seldom seen and a practical experience in three fields that we love, including, but not limited to, alternative agriculture, new age physics, metaphysics, and look who's on our screen, Dr. Miller. How are you doing this evening?
My stock response in the last time I said I was going bald and from natural causes. I pulled it out.
Well, it's anyone's guess why. So
I
for you guys who
yeah.
don't know,
Well, I'm bald now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can be insatiable.
Yeah.
Dr. Richard Allan Miller has his own website. Go check out Richard Allan Miller. That's ALAN Miller.com. We're going to leave links below where you can get all of his books. He is prolific. He has written so much that he can't even get it published in time. And tonight we're going to start the discussion with sustainable lifeboats. This is a concept that Dr. Miller has been talking about for decades. And let me start, Rick, if I may, with the purpose. And according to, in your own words, the purpose is to develop a number of generic models of farms for alternative crops for various regions of North America using drip irrigation systems for organic weed control and conservation of water and many other concepts. So can you give us a general overview of the sustainable lifeboat?
It's a lifeboat with oars. Basically, when something happens, whether it's a pandemic, an earthquake, the New Madrid fault line goes crazy with the Mississippi River, you realize that there are 21 Daiichi-like GE reactors on that line right now with Yellowstone active under it, and it takes one full year to power one of those down. That's 21 Fukushimas ready to happen in a single moment with a grid down situation. Matt Stein,
Rick,
my partner.
Not to mention that there's like 5,500. There are 5,500 of the major chemical pipelines that move under that area too. So it's a complete loss.
Well, it's all going to, if you look, and you can Google yourself, the military map of worst case scenarios that we use is Chet Snow. You can show a future map of America, Chet Snow, and you'll get the idea. The coastline of the entire West Coast, all the way down through Mexico, west of I-5, is gone. There will be water that comes in. All of Seattle, Vancouver Island has one little tiny piece of a lump up there. Goes all the way down to Peru. Now, with that said, that's all going to happen in approximately, well, what the military believes is the most likely scenario is an 8.4 off of Crescent City in the ocean out there. There's a volcano active out there. It has recently spewed. We've had some tremors all the way up through Alaska and Hawaii. But right now, that Pacific plate is poised to go up in the air and slide down, just like in the movies. And it'll be everything west of I-5 with a tsunami that will probably come in as a result. Now, that means you're going to need to be at least 1,200 feet up in the what we call the coastal range, which is an offshoot of the Cascade Range that comes down along the coastline. They're not really mountains past Mount St. Helen. However, they are enough to stop most of the tsunami.
Dr. Miller, you froze up when
The
you said
Trinity Alps.
most of the tsunami. Now, just for general reference, because you didn't really
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, because you didn't really generally reference this. What we're talking about is the Cascadia subduction zone and a major fault there. Continue, please.
Yes. Okay. When that happens, um, life will change. And that's one of the reasons why Oregon has already outlawed nuclear power plants. The one in Hanford right now is leaking into the Columbia River. They're showing in the tuna being caught off of San Francisco, and I don't know if we've gotten it down as far as LA, but the fish coming in that are radioactive presence is not from Fukushima. That has its own problem and its own scales, but what we're seeing is from Hanford. Everything's leaking, and all the reactors that are on in the United States, like Indian Point up on the Hudson River, they're all leaking. And it takes like one full year to power one of those down. You don't just turn it off. It takes time because of the heat from the nuclear power plant. If you don't have that water to cool it, there it is. And so that would be said that we're being terraformed right in front of our eyes
in the event
by
of
a life form that survives.
Yeah, in the event of a huge catastrophe, people living near or downwind of those facilities are going to be in major threat zone. But they're going to be limited.
Well, that'll be uninhabitable for several 100,000 years. It's about tritium, not deuterium. Deuterium is that's an isotope that's very easily mined in the South Seas between New Zealand and Antarctica. In fact, half the water down there is probably deuterium. And so that's not a problem. It's the tritium that's the problem. And that's what the reactors are all using in the Daiichi-like forms that GE designed. And there was some talk of, refurbishing them in Texas and other places. And that all nonsense stopped. There's, I think, only two operating right now in California. Washington has only got Hanford. And but that's not enough to take out the West Coast if we're not careful.
Dr. Miller, let's get back to the sustainable lifeboat idea and its importance. Can you tell us what it's all about?
When this happens, where are you going to go for your food? Yeah. When this all happens, where are you going to go for your food? So we started setting up about, maybe 20 years ago. I started underground bunkers I started here in the Free State of Jefferson. I worked for Dennis Kucinich in the Midwest. He's got 4 states with 8 sustainable lifeboats right now going on. We were down in Wichita, and that was where Arlo Guthrie and his clan is. His daughter and his granddaughter came out. It was like a little Americana. It was very cool. The thing that is most important about the distinction of current permaculture to what I understand permaculture to be is the concept of taking habitat into account. If you live on the coast, you eat fish. If you live in the Midlands, you eat grains. That's gurdjieff. And you eat your environment. And so things climatize. And so chemistries are found in each state that are analogs. For example, on the East Coast, it's golden seal. On the West Coast, it's Oregon grapefruit. Has more high bearing, and they use it to cut golden seal when it's sold by the ton to Germany. I have been in this a long time, and the problem is the way Matt put it, and this is how you look at it. You have 3 minutes for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. What's most important? Once you understand that, well, your air, you only have 3 minutes. If you don't have your air, you're in trouble. Now, that's one that's I don't think it's going to be a problem. And if it is, you're in the wrong place, blah, blah, blah. But man has always survived these epochs. The Clovis that they're unearthing down in Mexico right now, uh, they appear to have had spaceflight, and they crawled out of a cave and became the Hopi. So, with that understanding of the possible level of extinction, um, you need to understand. Well, you need to
Rick,
understand.
listen to me. This morning, I did a 2 hour interview, and we were talking serendipitously about the same exact topic, and what we were getting at, because they talk about DARPA and the deep state, is that while you, Dr. Miller, were making the sustainable lifeboats above ground, so to speak, in bunkers where the normal people live on the surface, the powers that be have been boring the underground from Denver all the way into White Sands in New Mexico. And there are underground cities.
How did Johnny Depp put it? What do you mean, we, white man? What do you mean, we? I was at Broom Lake before Dulce existed. And we do have missile silos that we're using in Arapahoe, Arizona. 12 family have a vertical aquaculture system. Where I was going with this concept, well, I'm the one that raised in the military went underground, get a grip. The, the reason you go underground is because of a Hopi legend that states there will be a burst from the sun that will sterilize a portion of the earth. If it's 4 hours, only a very small portion through Canada will probably get it. Who knows where it's going to be, but you need 10 feet of dirt between you and that burp. And it's going to sterilize everything that it hits. If the earth turns 24/7, that's when you have your seed bank. Okay? And what you go down with when you come back up, you have to come up with everything. Your seed, your mycorrhiza, and your various life forms in between that has, that was Paul Newman when he did his Spotted Owl movie, showed you the distinction between a forest and a tree farm. Now, I have written books that are unpublished called forest farming, where you use the forest as your various stories. What I wanted to say the distinction on in permaculture is that it's habitat sensitive and predicated on where you are dictates the kind of lifeboat that you would be doing. We have monolithic domes, your Earth ship. I remember the Gaia project, and before that, when Tony Van Zandt was doing his, hydroponics, I did hydroponics with Lunar Base Alpha 1. That's what I do. More credentials.
Yeah.
The problem is the Quaker up in Sandpoint, Idaho, are not going to have exposure to the problems you down in Colorado are. And so his or their, peaceable kingdom has been up there. Lois Weiss did the, I'm sorry?
Let me jump in real quick here and say that I agree with everything you're saying, that if you want to make a successful food forest in your region, it has to be
It's all dedicated on your environment. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
the
Rick,
bottom line. It tells you what you want.
We also need to be telling the public is that they can create geothermal greenhouse environments in rigid greenhouses in these zones and recreate other zones that are not typical of their area. So if you want a true lifeboat, you would want a food forest that is producing based on your local zone, and then you'd want some large rigid greenhouses with earth tubes and geothermal capability to bring the zone up to, let's say, zone 8, zone 12, or zone 14, so you could grow
that's
a
given.
bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
So hydroponics and Art Pilgrim in Lunar Base Alpha 1 in Seattle that was actually in South Park and then later became Kent and the Space Center. He moved to Kuwait, and all of their infrastructures there now are a result of Dr. Art Pilgrim, who is my mentor in that regard. I dated his daughter, Vicky, for a while, a long time ago in faraway universe. Hydroponic systems have become less functional to newer designs, just like freeway systems and how you're going to exit a freeway. I posted that on Facebook. That's a visual one showing the different kinds of exits that they have and how efficient they are for moving volume of traffic. It's called fluid physics. Now, the hydroponic systems have moved now toward vertical aquaculture, whereas the water falls to the next set of plants below it, they heat up the water, dictating which plants are below, because each plant is got, and as we've studied it now, bandwidth specific. It isn't white light or sunlight or long ultraviolet. It's actually a very narrow bandwidth for broccoli, which is different than cauliflower. That's why LEDs are used, because they're cheaper, they're bandwidth specific, and they don't require hardly any kind of power at all to run them. Further, you could grow your crystals for making your solar panels like you would a crop. If you have 9 families, I've done a project study to show it's cheaper to put a production line in if you've got 9 families involved. If you have 9 families, it's cheaper to make your own LEDs and converters, or what we call solar batteries. Boy, you sound terrible. You know what we need to do is, what, do you have a cold? What's going on exactly? Talk to me.
I'm doing dabs, Rick, and I'm on mute, so you're the only one that can hear that.
Okay, good. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay. I have friends that are real sick right now. And what I'm doing
Rick,
is I'm
we don't
having
get sick
them.
at the ranch. Listen, we've been on this ranch for 5 years. We've gone from the high country to the lower country. In 5 years, neither Leah and I have been sick. I think I have gotten a cold, multiple colds, maybe even the flu, but I show no symptoms because our immune system is in such a high echelon that we do not get incapacitated. We don't have to go to bed or go to the hospital or any of that. We just do not get sick.
Yeah. That's the key. You know, your body is probably the finest laboratory there is on Earth, and can handle things that even our most sophisticated laboratories haven't even dreamed of yet. Neurotransmitters aside, your NK killer cells and all the rest of the things, what we call the immune system, nobody really understands how it works yet. And that's the part that's so interesting for me, and why my chemistries decided to go full spectrum over the German standardized extract protocols. And I find that rather than working tincture and going through digestive processes, you know, your gut, it's better to just run that product like a mushroom through a jet engine at Mach 3, and now you have a 40 nanometer. And what China was doing prior to this weirdness that just happened was they took Coca-Cola Asia and were using polysaccharides rather than sugars from cane. They were using polysaccharides from pharmaceutical mushrooms. And guess what the Coca-Cola did over cocaine? Now, Florida P.O. Inc. doesn't do that yet. But all of the Asians have been using these mushrooms for a long time. And so some families are not getting sick because of the polysaccharides. Basically, it's your body that does things. And allotropic medicines have moved us toward this concept of prescription drugs and supplements. And that's horseshit. If you eat correctly, well, that's right. You know what I'm trying to say. And everybody's different. And there is a blood type consideration. I'm sorry?
There is a blood type consideration, but the main problem is that the majority of the population either lives in a food desert where they cannot get the correct type of food with the nutrition density inside, or they think they live in an excellent place because their supermarket has so many wonderful, colorful vegetables, and they think they're getting the nutrient density they need from that food. And what everyone needs to know is that commercially farmed, even some organic mass-produced produce has almost zero nutrient density. You have to be growing your own food, sprouting your own
that's probably
micrograins to get the nutrients you need, or take supplements. So before we delve into some of these natural healing, Rick, and the coronavirus, let's talk to the people about
So
some of your ideas about the Albert Schweitzer
yeah.
Institute.
So, but first, I wanted to say, like when you're talking about eating locally, and I absolutely agree. The bee pollen that you would get and the honey that you would get from a local hive would be allergens and other kinds of nutrients in there that are habitat specific. And that's again one of the reasons why certain plants like echinacea now have 9 species and 2 subspecies or cultivars where it's mutated into these different plants that grow in Tennessee as opposed to Oregon. Now, with echinaceas, for example, uh, golden seal, some of these others have been around for centuries, starting with Culpeper and then moving into Dr. Shook, who was the one in the 30s that brought the Mormons into the big picture. The Mormons probably in the United States use 50% of the supplements in the world. Um, Germany, Hamburg, it's written in stone that Europe will use 10 times whatever has been used in the United States. That's another fact that most people don't understand because, Germany and Netherlands have been using these herbs since 400 years before America existed. And India and China used to have a thing called the Silk Trail, which was following the muskox over the Silk Trail going for spices in the spice trade. And the spice trade has been, whoever controlled spice trade has always controlled world trade. And when Hong Kong was closing down, everybody thought it was going to be Hamburg. And guess where it moved? Vancouver, British Columbia. Every single one of your pharmaceutical houses up there has a presence in Vancouver, BC today. But now they can't get their ingredients because of what's happening in China and its lockdown. And that's where we've just seen our, Chinese debt neutralized. Let me say this. I grew several hundred ton of feverfew for Centrum. And we baled it up in Paradise near in California before it got whacked. It was all farming in there. And it shipped off as bales of feverfew to China where it was capsulated and tableted and then brought back to the United States and sold. And that's what you're up against right now. And so the first thing that I would recommend going into your garden is your herbal pharmacy. Once, your heart medicines, your blood thinners, the things like that are going to be the crops that are missing first. And everybody starts to know them because Walmart and Walgreens have closed down. Walmart is already in trouble. And that's where all your pharmacy comes from, unfortunately, today. It used to be. Well, this is herbal pharmacy. You want to talk about crops, that's what you put in first. What you need to keep yourself well.
What we're finding,
each of us has been strung out because of allotropic.
Rick, what we're finding from the outbreak of COVID-19 is there's going to be a supply chain diminution of necessary pharmaceuticals that hundreds of millions of people are taking, including blood thinners and heart medication. So, but there is not enough time for hundreds of millions of people to be planting the medicinal herbs they need. The population should have been taking these medicinal herbs the whole time. And so they've been duped by the powers that be to keep them compliant. And now guess what? When there's supply chain issues and 100 million people don't get their pharmaceuticals, you know what the powers that be are going to do? Nothing.
And now that's when Carl Sagan looked down at you from space and said, would you like to go for another ride? Guess what? Yeah, now you got that picture. That's exactly correct. We're not out of time. I have a network. I'm known as the Postman. I have at least one sustainable lifeboat in every state and every province in Canada, at least one. We have tunnels on the East Coast right now that start up in Maine, and you don't even have to be above ground until you're down in Florida. I have one tunnel right here in Rogue River that is, Grants Pass, Rogue River, goes all the way down to Hyam in the Trinity Alps. That's 4.5 hours by motorcycle. Free state of Jefferson. Hoorah. That's what I did. Now, with that said, the farming is such that 12 families, we have enough protein at Lost Creek right now and the headwaters of the Rogue River in an old abandoned fish farm that they used to stock the Rogue River is now got an alternate school up there teaching children how to grow salmon. And that right there, that facility right today has enough protein to feed the entire state of Oregon. Right this moment. Those infrastructures exist. And you just are now discovering, oh yeah, well we've been up in Winnipeg, we've been doing this for Winnipeg years ago in the 90s. The Mounties went in and found a bunch of bikers, Hells Angels, that were growing pot underground in these big cargo container boxes. They put them underground and grow them just like in the movies. And they went in and they busted them. And what they did is they gave the hydroponic system that they found to the high school in the center of Winnipeg. And Winnipeg high school kids right now today are producing enough fresh basil to feed the entire state of New York on their pesto and Italian food needs as a niche market.
Rick, let's get real. Let's get real.
That's what I have.
Your sustainable lifeboats are not going to keep hundreds of thousands.
Real. They're functioning.
Yes, but they're not going to keep hundreds of thousands of people alive that don't have their heart medicine. And that's my point.
So there was this guy that listened to your show and contacted me, and he's doing art form down in Northern California on the dodecahedron as an art piece down near, a UFO center or something. And Mount Shasta, did it by any other name. And I turned him on to some new stuff. We have a 3D printer up on Bainbridge Island, for example, the Love family, that will print a 30-foot geodesic dome in special, new developed, lightweight strength magnesium concrete or bubble concrete. Okay? That was designed for the domes of Mars and a screenplay I did for Fox. Now, what we've got is a new system that will print a three-dimensional geodesic dome that can stand up to 800 miles an hour wind that will bury in the soil with the top 1/3 with a shielding over it to catch the sun when they can. And that system was something I worked on in the 70s. And the 3D printer exists, and now I'm going to make some more. And so once we can print these things in 24 hours, a 30-foot dome.
It takes months to have a crop of medicinal herbs. So what we can glean from all this is that
we're a pharmacy.
Listen, we've had for decades the technology and the infrastructure to make this available all across the world. It hasn't been implemented. It's our own fault. The people that you call the powers that be, the government, are not protecting you because this infrastructure does not exist worldwide and in communities everywhere to protect us in the event of a need for this. And it's too late. It's a dollar too late. The people that have this infrastructure will be lifeboats.
Actually, there are already. I have Anastasia up in Russia and kibbutz in Israel. Exist, and the Gopekli Tempe artifacts where they were underground. They just, on my website, I have a notice on Scotland, and the tunnels ran from Scotland all the way down to Turkey under Europe. Those tunnels already exist, and what I'm doing now is I'm mapping a system outside North America. I have only done North America. I didn't even do Monte Gringo in Mexico City, and that's got catacombs that go down, oh Jesus, I don't know how many centuries. I mean, we're talking incredible. Oh, Monte Gringo is their prison in the center of Mexico City, and imagine 20 New York cities in one spot, just, millions of people. And every single one of those homes has a water tank on top of their roof. You don't. Water is going to be the thing that makes or breaks North America. And I'm going to say that you need, as of this lecture that I'm speaking, I'm going to recommend everybody have at least 3 days of water on hand for everyone in your family, including your dogs, cat, whatever, gopher, whatever you're collecting, and a replacement plan within the first day. And someone asked me, what's the best water filters? And I said, well, I use a Berkey, and I buy my filters once every, yeah, but I have actually a Brita. I actually like the Brita better than the Berkey. And believe it or not, and when I can no longer get my replacement fillers, for filters, that's easy. I take the top off it, pour out that garbage that's in it, and put campfire coals, the coals that have been burnt through, and then when you hit them, they powder. That's activated charcoal. That's what's inside that, and you do that from a campfire. And that takes care of your water in terms of potting it and taking toxins or deer urine, whatever in it, out. It will not take out radiation. It will not necessarily filter out all of your viruses. That is done with distillation. There are many different systems of distillation where you turn the water into a steam, and then you condense it back. I guess you vapor out, capture it, going back. When you reform it, it does have structure. For little tips that I would train SEALs on, my SEAL team used to carry a small vial of baking soda. Homeopathy. What is homeopathy? Homeopathy is where a single drop of something in a pool of water restructures the entire glass. That has, because water has many faces to it. There's para and ortho, the two different dipolar regions, which makes that a dimensional gate. It has two isotopes, deuterium and tritium. Tritium is extremely dangerous, and deuterium is your fusion bomb that, is going to be the future, like they did with Building 7, using a neutron fluorine fusion bomb. I sent you that paper, and the trigger was from Carnegie Mellon, and the ignition part was from Lockheed. They're teleportation laser, and they drilled it out and experimented there. That weapon now is everywhere. And Russia has it everywhere. They're deploying it all through Golan Heights. And it has the precision of 1.4 nanometers. Do you realize the precision of something like that, surgical? Weapons. I watched this sci-fi movie the other day called Epoch, where this artifact hits the Earth about 20 billion years ago. And all of a sudden, at this moment, makes itself known, comes up as a big monolith. And first thing that we want to do is shoot it down. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Look what happened. What it did back to defend itself. Well, now, with that said,
Dr. Miller, let's talk about ESP. You, me, and Rex Bear all watched this movie recently, and neither of us talked about to each other about it. That's crazy.
Yeah, Rex is cool. He's excitable like you are. I love your generation. Get all excited. It's infectious. Thank you.
Well, let's talk about more of the COVID-19 because we got away from Schweitzer University, so we might as well keep on with the virus.
Well, yeah, and I know that, and the Sustainable Lifeboat. I just wanted you to know there is a network right now available. What state do you want to live in? And that proposal that I developed, statement of funds, that's a model for a business plan that could be used where you can offer where a person indentures into growing things. I think everybody needs to support their farmers market. I think you need to eat, as an exercise this next year, at least 40% of the food you consume was grown by either you or your neighbor. And if you can do that and have your water thing together, right now you will have a minimum of at least a 50% survival coefficient on what may happen in the next couple of years. And we know something's going to happen, but how and when? Jet Propulsion Laboratory predicted this was going to be our worst winter in history, and it wasn't. It started out to look that way, and then it wasn't. They have also predicted, because of the sun and its movement, that by the year 2024, there will be parts of Canada that are uninhabitable. You're going to have to be underground. It won't be even about a day after tomorrow. The day after tomorrow thing is because of the Gulf currents reboot. And it has to do with saline levels in the ocean. When the saline levels get to a certain category, there's a weather change. It has to happen. It reboots the currents. I remember Europe.
Yeah, the Beaufort Gyre
Europe
is actually still stuck, Rick. It's been stuck up there for quite some time. And when that releases, it could literally shut down the Gulf Stream and create havoc in Europe.
Well, Europe used to have 9 and then 7 currents. Then it dropped down to 4, and today Europe has 0 currents, and the Gulf Stream's almost gone. And so the day after tomorrow will be just like in the movies. It'll come on so quickly, there's no warning. And there will be survivors in the middle of the coldness. That's what the bunkers are for. And I have, bomb shelters, old bomb shelters, missile silos, caves, gold mines, whatever, in different states that have networked with each other. That's what I'm doing, trying to connect you with monolithic domes in Cloudland. They're all over. And what I've done is try to put a network together where you're all talking to each other, and then set up something like the Pony Express, just like in the movies, and how you communicate with each other when you can't because of the EMP strike or whatever thing that takes everything out. By the way, that could be some pimple-faced kid in Pakistan. Ha! Look what I can do. Blip. And the world is down cold. Back into the Stone Ages, just like that.
And another big threat is the sun going to this grand solar minimum with the waning magnetosphere. We're way overdue for a large solar proton event or a large super flare, similar to the Carrington event.
That's what we're talking about. That's the Hopi.
Even the Charlemagne event.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest
the Hopi have talked about you need 10 feet soil between you and that burp. You're going to notice it, like even now. When I was a kid, the sun was yellow. Today, it's not. It's white. And it absolutely has changed color. And I can tell you that there are fewer flies on the cow plots. Ants on the ground, fewer. And that's where it starts, in the lower life forms, and cascades upward. I don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you that last year, my bunker has access to a satellite that has infrared, and I saw lava strikes in the Northern Territories above BC, and I saw one lava strike in the Trinity Alps. And my buddy over in Ohio has tomography with his bunker. I network with other bunkers. And he has tomography, which I don't have, on his satellite, and was able to see Yellowstone as far as Ohio underground. That means Yellowstone is going to go. And when it does, you're going to have a big hole there. I don't know how big, but, you can presume some parts of lower Idaho are gone. And into Oregon, some, I don't know yet. Blue Mountains, I don't know. We don't know. We just can guess worst case scenario, and then do the best we can to be prepared. You can't prepare. And that's why you Doomsday Preppers and all these other shows that are on, how do you rate his system? 92%, 46%. They're inadequate in one area or another. What the lifeboats are about is that when we do, the USS America is taking on water. And I started that, Matt Stein and I. Before he died, we were doing urban survival skill workshops, 8-hour intensives of how to prepare yourself for whatever happens. And a zombie is East LA when they're out of food. look at what's happening right now. Well, I mean, just watch how people behave. They're fearful. That's the first enemy of man, and they act like animals. Then they become powerful, and then they still are animals. I've watched how these different systems work, and Aldous Huxley, he and H.G. Wells, they had vision. And this Kuntz thing that's going out right now, talking about the Wuhan back in 1987, his book. I that's because Hollywood, if she could, if you can see it in your mind's eye, not only is it real, you can count on it. And unfortunately, that's why I now say, man, we have a responsibility for the thoughts we choose to entertain. And that's that. Because you're bringing on your own. It was Joseph Campbell that said, when you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential. It's ever present.
So what are the words of wisdom that you have to people listening now? If we do control our own fate, what can we do, Dr. Miller?
I started with meditation. I started training my mind. And that's why I can laugh like Johnny Depp. He says to the Lone Ranger, "What do you mean, we, white man?" Yeah, I think that attitude.
Not everyone is going to eat magic mushrooms, Rick.
No, magic mushrooms are toxins. And what happens when you eat that toxin, your body freaks out and produces a very similar but quite different neurotransmitter, like dimethyltryptamine, in terms of psilocin and psilocybin, biocystin. I can run down the chemistries. I'm a world authority in that area. And basically can tell you that microdosing just jumpstarts the brain. I'm writing books now on how to set off those chemicals just using envisionment in your mind's eye. And that's why I would say Hollywood, if she could. If you can see it in your mind's eye, that's what makes it real.
And more
some of these sacred geometries, what they do.
If you want to get more of this information from Dr. Richard Allan Miller, you could check out his website here. He has a free resource library and some books to buy. I don't even know. Where would I click to buy your books? Up here at the bookstore. There's a cart and his account. So go check out what he has to say.
Drop it down and there they are. All different kinds of things going on.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up.
And I got lots more where that came from. I've just completed a brand new book ready to go up probably tomorrow called Stress Management, a Holistic Approach. Because all of you, the only reason you get sick is because you're not coping with stress. Coping, if you didn't have pain, you wouldn't be alive. That's what neurotransmitters are about. That's what they meant by taphasia. You're burning up with neurotransmitters and consuming, ash, if you want to look at it like a mechanical thing. But metaphorically, there's something more going on here. You're self-organizing. And that part is to try and train the mind as a tool to be useful. When you say something, for example, you're listening to yourself. That means you never say anything negative. I can't do it. If you're saying that, you're now reinforcing that belief. It's a simple process. And that's why your glass is always half full. That's why everything happens for a reason, and everything leads to something better. And that's why it's not getting bad out there. What we have is an opportunity to change things. And that's why I'm doing my university. Because I, start with our children. That's where you start, not you or me. We're too old and grumpy. What a child is different than an adult, in that an adult is more experienced. But by being more experienced, he's also more limited and won't do that because he knows why he doesn't want to do that same mistake twice. And a child doesn't know that. And because imagination is reality, watch what they do with their sandbox.
So ladies and gentlemen, that was a sneak peek to our next podcast, which is on the Albert Schweitzer University for. It's basically going to be metaphysics for children. There's going to be a 2-part course, one for 12 and under, and one for older or tweens. But right here, you see it in effect. Quantum entanglement for babies could actually be a book. And Rick and I are going to be talking about this exclusively in a podcast that we do about the Albert Schweitzer University for Metaphysics for Kids. That's awesome. Thank you for joining us tonight, Rick. Any parting words for our listeners on how to survive and thrive during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Keep a diary. Yeah, keep a diary. Start with a diary, and if you have a daily entry of how you're feeling, what you've experienced, what you've learned, what you don't understand, this is magical memory, and it's how you time travel into the past. Because looking at what you wrote 2 years from now will be very, very interesting. And what you do is make sure that everyone tonight, you have 3 days of water. And the way you calculate that is you need 1 ounce for every, 10 kilos or something like that. I need 60 ounces of water I drink a day. And animals, you scale it down. Everybody's dehydrated. And at 5% dehydration is when you're, quote, thirsty. That means if you're thirsty, you have not been hydrating correctly. You're not functioning at your top end mentally. That's that.
So positive reinforcement.
10%, you're dead.
Drink plenty of water, get some sleep, reduce your stress. We love you, Dr. Richard Allan Miller. Thanks for coming on the show, and be safe.
Pleasure, yeah.